Hi, I'm Kesenya and welcome to the final one in our series of Uranus transiting through the houses. We've done all the houses and now we're doing Uranus's transit through the 12th house. So firstly, for those who haven't tuned in yet to any of the Uranus transit videos, what does Uranus rule? Uranus rules invigoration, excitement. His purpose is liberation, to set you on a path of freedom to becoming your authentic self. So he represents truth, invigoration, freedom, liberty. He's also related to a bit of rebelliousness, eccentricity, quirkiness, highly creative, highly intuitive, very left of center, alternative type planet. And this we see from the fact that he actually, of all the planets, he's the only one who spins on his side rather than around this way. He spins like this. So he's very quirky and very different to the standard planetary action, I guess, out there. He also travels through the horoscope, and he travels all the way around the horoscope through the course of 84 years. So really, he represents a human lifespan. Roughly, we live till that age now. And so he will spend 7 years in each individual sign. And I use whole sign astrology for those who don't know. So Uranus will spend 7 years in each individual sign, therefore each individual house. And when he is in that house, he is going to invigorate that house with Uranian energy. As we know, if you've studied a bit of astrology, a house represents a field of your life, an area, a realm of your life. So it might be children, it might be love, it might be career, it might be home. There's a house that represents every different facet of a human's life. And of course, when Uranus goes into that house, he brings invigoration. He breaks boundaries. He liberates. He makes you more authentic. He makes you more free. He might bring a bit of rebelliousness. He might bring a bit of eccentricity to whatever that area and facet of life is. Might be home, might be family, might be children, might be marriage, might be whatever. So that's what Uranus does, and that's the time frame that he works on. Currently, as I'm recording this video, Uranus has just moved into the sign of Taurus. So this means that for anybody with Gemini rising, which is here, and unfortunately my wheel, when it's on the sign of Gemini or Sagittarius, it likes to take a bit of a walk, which is quite ironic because those two signs are very restless. So it's very accurate, isn't it? The universe has a sense of humor. So I might have to hold it here a little as we talk. But if your rising sign, seen by the arrow here, is Gemini, sign of Gemini there, then we count 12 signs from the first house. Gemini will be your first house if your ascendant is there. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 houses. Gets us to currently in 2019 the sign of Taurus. Now if you're watching this video in another 7 years time, another 21 years time, you know, down the track a bit, and you're like, okay, well, where does Uranus fall? How do I know what house Uranus is in for me? Well, firstly, you need to know your rising sign. So if you don't know that, pop over to astro.com, plug in your details, and you'll need a birth time. And it should come up then with a map of the sky similar to this one, and it will show AC. That stands for ascendant degree. And for example, if your AC was in the sign of Gemini, that is your rising sign in whole sign astrology. And that means the whole sign of Gemini. I mean, you could have your AC at 29 degrees of Gemini. It would make Gemini your first house. Okay? So pop over there, and then once you know what your rising sign is, scoot on over to planetwatcher.com, which is a great resource that shows you where the planets are at any given moment. And you can look and see, oh, okay, Uranus is in Taurus, or Uranus is in Gemini, or Uranus is in Cancer, wherever he happens to be at that moment in time when you look at the planetwatcher.com map of the sky. So then you can find out where Uranus is, what sign it's in. And so then you can calculate, okay, I have my rising sign in Gemini, currently Uranus is in Taurus. Let's count how many houses going this direction, anti-clockwise. You can count how many houses away from your ascendant Uranus is sitting, and that will give you your the house that Uranus is transiting, and then you just look at the video that's pertinent to you out of this series. So I've gone through that at the beginning of each of these videos. Thank you for those who know all this information and have allowed me to explain to those who are learning what it means and how you can find out what house Uranus is transiting for you. But in 2019, for the next 7 years, Uranus is transiting through the 12th house for anyone who's Gemini rising. Well, what does it mean to have Uranus transiting the 12th house? Well, the 12th house represents things that are a little bit ethereal. There's kind of 4 realms that I like to think, generally speaking, that the 12th house correlates to. And this is anything spiritual, not religious, not cultural practices, as we see through the 9th house, but anything spiritual. So your yoga practice or your meditation practice, or when you go walking in the evening by the lake or the river and you just commune with nature, that's a spiritual practice. So anything that is a spiritual practice for you is 12th house, and that is our connection, however it is that we connect with the divine realms. So spiritual practice is the first thing that I correlate with the 12th house. The second thing is divine creativity. This is the type of creativity that comes as a psychic download from somewhere outside ourselves, where we're a channel for something exceptional. There's a lot of musicians who, they'll tell you, suddenly it just came to me, and it was like I was an instrument that the divine was playing through, or an artist who gets exceptional insights and talent or ability in a flood that's sort of like beyond their usual capacity. This is divinely inspired creativity, which is the 12th house. It's also, so we've got spirituality, divine creativity, divine healing is also seen from the 12th house. This is where we can get restoration that's miraculous. Like the 12th house is connected to the planet Neptune and Pisces, the sign. They're all correlated with one another, and these 3 are associated with miracles, things that happen in unexplainable ways, inexplicable events. You're riddled with cancer, you go to the doctor, he says you've got 6 months to live, you go back for a checkup in 3 months and he says, oh, it's all gone. How do you explain that? Well, it's very Piscean, 12th house, Neptunian, miraculous. This is what we associate with 12th house as divine healing. So the ability to be healed, the ability to be restored, and it doesn't have to happen in such a whiz-bang way either. You can stub your toe and you feel like your toe's broken, and the next morning you wake up and, oh, it's actually, divine healing doesn't have to be spectacular. Miracles happen in many ways, day by day, as we live our lives. It's just that a lot of the time we're blind to the little miracles that occur in our life. But anyway, divine healing is also seen from the 12th house. And then finally, escapism is the 12th house. This is where we go and spend a year in an ashram. That the movie, which I loved, Eat, Pray, Love, with Julia Roberts. She went on her 12th house Piscean escapist experience for about a year, and part of that was spent in an ashram, and part of that was in England, and part of that was it England or Spain? Somewhere. It was wherever they eat lots of pizza, so it would have been Italy. But she went on her escapist experience, and that's very Piscean, very 12th house, very Neptunian. So they're the 4 realms. Anything that we can correlate with spirituality, creativity, divine healing, and escapist. So going to an ashram is definitely this. Also being put in a mental institution is this. So there's a shadow and a light side to escaping. People can escape through the mundane society, through being in prison, through being in hospital, through being in an institution, or they can escape by having a holiday to Club Med, or going to a yoga retreat or a day spa, or escaping into a movie or a book. Anything that is escaping from ordinary reality, and this can include drug taking that takes you out of the current reality that you're living in. Drug taking is associated with the 12th house. So any escape, I mean, escape is the ultimate word. Any way that you get away from the ordinary, mundane, everyday, earthly reality that you are experiencing day by day, that's a 12th house thing. So now that we know 12th house, there's a lot more to the 12th house than that, but they're the 4 general themes. When you think of the 12th house, they're the themes that come into play. So when we have a Uranus transit to the 12th house, any unconscious fears and psychological boundaries will become liberated and brought into our awareness. The other thing that is kind of a side issue or side theme with the 12th house is anything that is hidden. And that's why any of our fears or psychological boundaries, 12th house has no boundaries. It's boundaryless. It's everybody's welcome and let's all be one, and anything hidden. And when we talk hidden, it's not like the 8th house where things are hidden from our awareness, like the skeletons in the closet. We know full well that we've got this sitting in the back of our mind, or in like the skeleton in the closet. That's 8th house, where we're aware but we're keeping things actively hidden. 12th house is our subconscious, where we don't know we've got stuff hidden in the depths until it's brought out into the light. So it could be it's connected to the past lives, early childhood, stuff that we subconsciously have sitting there that we aren't consciously aware of. It's not a skeleton in the closet, it's hidden even from us. So any unconscious fears, anything subdued in the subconscious and the psychological realms is going to be liberated by Uranus transiting through the 12th house and brought into our awareness. We're going to be aware of anything that's been hidden in our lives, and it's going to bring us spiritual freedom. So you might suddenly during this transit become aware that you have a habit of always expecting rejection. You may never have seen that in your life, but you sit down one day with Uranus transiting the 12th house and you're like, my goodness, I always attract bosses who expect so much of me and reward me so little. Or I always attract men who reject me, who treat me really bad. And you think, you get pondering, you get thinking, and Uranus brings your awareness, your subconscious actions into awareness, and you're like, oh, cha-ching, light bulb, because light bulb moments are ruled by Uranus. Cha-ching, I finally get it. I'm attracting all this rejection energy, not good enough, not pleasing enough, can't keep a man, can't keep a woman. I'm attracting this energy of rejection, because that is subconsciously what I'm expecting. It's what I've been taught, maybe in childhood or in a past life, that I can only expect rejection from others, rejection from bosses, rejection from partners, rejection from other people, friends, everything. And so you are made aware, like I'm just using that as an illustration. I'm not saying that's the theme for everyone, but during this transit, you will be made aware of the subconscious attitudes, behaviors, motivations within you that are causing outer world effects in your life. So it's a great transit for creating spiritual freedom, because you will be made aware of these blockages, spiritual blockages, psychological blockages. You'll be made aware of them and you can set them free. Uranus is liberation, freedom, breaking any blocks, breaking any boundaries in life. So you're no longer going to be interested in the material realm so much with this transit. Your focus is going to shift to the spiritual realm, and you'll be passionate about spiritual awareness, enlightenment, becoming free from, like I've just described, blockages that have been with you for life. It's very liberating, and it's going to really be a period where you will want to and crave connection with the divine, connection with God. You're going to Like your motivation right now is going to be very much about spiritual up-leveling, stepping up the ladder of your journey to enlightenment, so to speak. So anything that is in your life right now, if you're having a 12th house Uranus transit, that is hiding the truth of your own personal divinity from you, this will be exposed and this will be broken. You will crave soul evolution above all else. Now, I went through my Uranus 12th house transit not so long ago, just before I entered a period of my life where I went through a great deal of upheaval and divorce and single mum and so on, which is, watch the first house video for that, what that will bring you in 7 years' time. If you're currently experiencing a 12th house Uranus transit. But prior to that, I remember I'd been raised in a very religious family who were very dutiful and conservative and a bit cult-like, for the lack of any other word. We only associated with people who thought like us, and that was a very small little community, etc. And that's how I'd been raised, and that's how I believed I had to be in the world. During my Uranus 12th house transit, I had one of the most profound spiritual revelations that has set me on a path to where I am currently at now. This was firstly the realization that Jesus said, like Jesus was accused by Pilate of being, the Jews are accusing you of saying that you're God. Is this correct? Said Pilate. And Jesus replied, yeah, it is as you say. So that was the first light. Okay, Jesus claimed to be God, but Jesus also said to his disciples and his followers, as I am, you too can be. You're just like, you can be like me. You are like me. He preached that message many times. And so I connected the dots during this transit of Uranus, and the realization to me was, Jesus said, we are all God. If he was God and we were like him, therefore we are all God. We are all the divine incarnate. Now, that was my spiritual revelation that changed my perspective completely, because I'd been raised to believe that God was up here and we were down here, and nary the twain shall meet. Really, the truth that was revealed to me, and Uranus's truth during this transit, was that I am the divine, and the divine is in me, and the divine is in you, and the divine is in everyone, because we are all manifestations of the divine. So this is me on my little preachy bandwagon, but that was my realization. You might not agree with that, and that's fine. But this was the spiritual revelation that I received from Uranus's transit to the 12th house, and this set me on a path of spiritual discovery like no other. My whole belief system from that point on absolutely flipped 180 degrees as I began to really deeply question the spirituality of everything that I'd been taught and everything that I'd believed. And it was so empowering and so liberating. Also during this time, and I'm just using these as examples, your experience might be very different to this, but this is an example of what I went through. Also during this time, I watched a documentary on the BBC called Son of God, and in it, the documentary maker who presented the video was talking about the life of Jesus. And of course, having been raised the way I was very fascinated by historical culture around Jesus' time and so on and so on. And in it, he described how the wise men who came to visit Jesus at his birth would actually have been astrologers. And I'd been raised to believe that astrology was sent from the devil. Dante's Inferno mentions that the lowest levels of hell are reserved for astrologers. Thank you, Dante, from 1200 AD. Really appreciate that. But that was all coming out of his imagination, so we won't go down that road. But that's what I was raised to believe. And then to see this documentary say, look, these guys, these rich rulers, they would have been, firstly, men from the east, and east of Israel in those days, obviously the area around Babylon and those parts, the Middle East. in those days, rich men, and remember these three were the wise young rulers, the rich men. We three kings of Orient are. So these guys, they would have been educated in the manner of the Middle East and Babylon and so on. And what did rich men from those parts of the world study more than anything else? They studied astrology. And so therefore, they were able to understand during this period of time, 2,000 years ago, they would have understood and looked at the skies and thought, my God, we are having this happen and this happen and this happen. There's going to be a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn on the morning of such and such, and it's going to be like a bright star in the sky. And there's a few different theories about what this star in the sky actually was 2,000 years ago. But these guys, the three wise men, would have known. They would have known exactly, what it represented astrologically and astronomically. And therefore they were like, right, well, anyone born at this time in this place is going to be someone really special. They would have been able to figure it all out because this is what their education would have entailed for them as wise male rulers from the eastern areas beyond Israel. So basically this BBC documentary, Son of God, I highly recommend it if you're interested in this sort of thing. It went into that, and it looked at the fact that these guys were not just, willy-nilly heading across the desert on their camels. They actually knew what they were doing, and they were astrologers, which is why they followed the stars. So that to me was the second massive life-changing revelation that I had when Uranus transited the 12th house. And it was, the scales fell from my eyes. It was light bulb moments. It was aha. Not everything is as it seems, and there is an explanation for all the sort of faith type things that I'd been taught to believe. To just believe that some random star just hopped along and some dudes followed it to where a child was born. Like, that's what I'd been taught to believe. But this actually made more sense. And so Uranus is a giver of knowledge, giver of wisdom, and in the 12th house is going to give spiritual knowledge and spiritual wisdom. So that's my backstory for anyone who needs to know that. But it really does explain the kind of revelations, the kind of life-changing epiphanies that you can have when you have Uranus transit the 12th house. And I owe Uranus's transit to the 12th house my current career. So it is a life-changing transit, or it can be, as most Uranus transits are. They are very life-changing and impactful. So as I said, just read my notes here, anything that hides the truth of your own personal divinity will be exposed and broken. And you're going to crave soul evolution and knowledge and soul wisdom and understanding above all else during this transit. It's what you want. You are, more than anything during this 7-year period, you're going to want to evolve your soul and grow your soul. So the question then is, have you been working on your soul evolution? Have you been pondering the great philosophical questions of life? Have you been exploring divine creativity? Have you been exploring divine healing? Have you been exploring divine spirituality, or even getting a hit of blessing through escapism? Often people will put off holidays and not go to the day spa or not have the break that they need because they think life, that's an indulgence and it's not as important as working hard, or, false thinking like that. Really, truly, what we need more than anything is holidays and breaks and times of introspection and times of retreat. And it's as important to our soul journey and our life journey as eating the right food, as getting a good night's sleep. Having a good mental break, physical break is so, so, so important. So now during this transit, ask yourself, what am I doing with my divine creativity? Am I tapping into my divine creativity? Am I tapping into my spirituality? Am I processing spiritual things? And the more you allow yourself and give yourself the space to do that, the more Uranus can speak to you. Am I trusting in divine healing? Am I open and available to divine healing happening in my life? So ask yourself these questions. It's a really, I keep moving this thing, it's a really great transit to be asking yourself the big questions about those 4 themes in life. And even getting a past life regression during this period is going to change your life entirely. So if you're into that sort of thing and you're interested in knowledge and wisdom coming from your past life, Uranus will reveal so much to you through getting a past life regression during this transit. So if you've never done that, then I'd encourage you to look into getting that done with someone you feel safe with, someone who you trust. I'm hoping at some point in the next 7 years or so to actually train as a past life regressionist myself when I get the opportunity, so you can come to me in about 7 years time when I've gone down that road and got my training. But in the meantime, look for someone trustworthy or someone recommended by a friend, or someone who really knows what they're doing, because you really want to be in a safe space if you do a past life regression, because some pretty hairy stuff can sometimes come up. But it will be liberating, it will be freeing for you, it will be empowering for you at this time when Uranus transits the 12th house. Sometimes, if you've been working hard on those 4 realms, this transit might actually be almost imperceptible to you. You mightn't actually notice the difference, because you'll be flowing through this sort of thing anyway. If you've been doing the work in those areas of life already, you'll be in that right space, and Uranus transit there will just feel like more of that invigoration spiritually, more of that knowledge and wisdom creatively and healing wise, etc. And you might experience, actually, if you've been working hard in those realms on yourself and your spirituality, if you've already been working on those realms in life and exploring them and being interested in them, then you might actually experience leaps and bounds forward in your soul evolution during this transit like never before. Your evolutionary capacity might just take off like a rocket at this time. And so it's not that you'll be experiencing a roller coaster with Uranus, which is usually the case in nearly every other house, but you will actually be experiencing like blast off spiritually now, or blast off creatively and inspirationally, or blast off like turbocharged rocket ship to the moon kind of stuff regarding personal healing and soul healing during this time. It is quite a fantastic transit. So if you haven't been working throughout your life on understanding your spirituality, getting in touch with the creative self, and all those things, then your struggles can actually be intensified through this Uranus transit, because you'll battle against Uranus's natural desire to liberate you in these areas, and to liberate your subconscious self. You see people, usually people who are listening to videos like this are not on this level. But you see people around who just don't want to acknowledge that they have a certain behavioral attitude, or they don't, like I described before, they won't take a holiday, they won't take retreat, they won't go into sort of spiritual assessment spaces. We're here to work, it's got to be bump, 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 this is how life is. And I'm just going to let that go now because I need both my hands. They're very materially oriented, where I'm trying to be head of the mining company, and you will do this and I will do this, and I haven't got time for spirituality, and no, I'm not going to do yoga, that's just for hippies, or people with those kind of attitudes in life. And we all come across them every now and again, people who are really closed to soul expansion, to evolution, to understanding. They're just so focused on the material that there is no space for the divine in them. They really struggle with the Uranus transit to the 12th house, because they're fighting their subconscious self and their subconscious desire to evolve by keeping their mental focus and their physical focus in the physical realm. So be aware though, if you just by chance happen to be one of those persons watching this video, highly unlikely, but if you are, you cannot fight Uranus. He will win. He is more powerful than you. So he will have his way here. And you might find that your secrets, which is secrets are ruled by the 12th house, they get exposed and you come crashing down through some exposed secret self, you know. Your past life karmic knots, they come out, they come to the surface. Maybe in a past life you were a real monster of a person, and that kind of attitude or bitterness or resentfulness really comes out now and brings you down, you know, makes you come crashing down now with this transit. There might be issues with self-love, with your sexuality, with your worthiness, with the ability to receive, all these sorts of things that are going to come out now in really difficult ways if you're not working on yourself spiritually. So, like I said, most people watching this video will be fine. don't worry. Yeah, so it can be difficult for people who are not interested in spiritual soul evolution and expansion. But your ability to experience divine healing now with this transit can expand extraordinarily. So by investing in counseling, doing dream work and dream analysis work, like I said, getting past life regressions, music therapy is ruled by the 12th house, art therapy, these are great processes that you can use to bring up the subconscious. Like, you know, I did an art therapy course years ago and it was magnificent, and it really revealed a lot of inner turmoil and struggles, and it was very enlightening. So doing these sorts of things, they're really empowering to expose subconscious thought patterns that we're not even aware that we are doing. They all can work miracles of healing in the 12th house, giving insight, giving soul healing, and that's the healing that we all should be striving for more than anything else. Like physical healing is one thing, but usually our physical illnesses are a manifestation and a result of soul illnesses that we have, you know, wrong attitudes or blocking, you know, who we are and things like that, that can cause physical manifestation, physical disease, physical illness when our soul is not right. So by doing therapy during this transit, you are working with the energy of Uranus to liberate your subconscious self and then provide for soul healing, inner healing, you know, that will ultimately affect your body's well-being as well. So you will get through this transit big flashes of insight now. Barriers are going to be broken with regard to any repressed childhood memories that you've had, and also any, like I've just described, past life stuff can come up for you, any past life issues. You might not even have an awareness that they are past life issues, you know. I remember reading a story in Patricia Walsh's wonderful book about karmic healing, about a young boy who was wouldn't have a shower. He refused to have a shower, and the parents were like, what is wrong with this kid? He will only have a bath. He's 13 years old. He refuses to have a shower. And they took him, they tried to, you know, so many things to figure out what's wrong, and they ended up taking him to get a past life regression with Patricia Walsh. And during that regression, he visualized and saw himself as a young child in the Holocaust, herded into one of the gas chambers, and like told to have a strip off, have a shower, get into the shower, and gassed to death. So horrific stuff. And obviously this is the root cause of why he won't have a shower, but he didn't know that until he had his past life regression. Fascinating story, and there's lots of instances like that that we can see where a past life experience is playing out for us in our present day reality. Perhaps not quite as horrific as that, but we have it nonetheless. We have attitudes, we have things, you know, ways of acting, ways of being, emotions towards different things that we can't explain, but they're actually connected to past incarnations. So anything that we've repressed, that we need to deal with from past lives can come up now in order that we can liberate our soul and liberate our our spirit and our psyche through Uranus's transit to the 12th house. There will be no compromise during this transit on your desire for spiritual wholeness now. You're going to crave it. And even the, CEO of the mining company, he will reach a point where he's going to want more than just the material, and it's probably going to come through challenges and frustrations that he will reach that point through this transit. It won't come easy for him like it does for someone who's always working on their spiritual growth. But there's no compromise, like I said. Now is the time for seeking and obtaining more spiritual wholeness. So disillusional thinking, it's released because Uranus will expose the truth. Sometimes with a 12th house emphasis in the chart, we can be quite delusional in our thinking. And, we're living in fantasy land, fairyland, and not connected with the reality of life. During this time, your connection to the divine can also be magnified. So trust your instincts, trust your internal guidance, trust the goosebumps, trust the intuition that flows through you now, because that will be Uranus directing you in the right direction. And it's a magical time for creativity. There's no blockages for your imagination, for your self-expression now. You can really, this is the time when you get those Van Gogh kind of ideas for your art, or that's coming from outside of you in beautiful, miraculous, free, unbridled ways. This time, Uranus's transit through the 12th house is the channel that is now opening for the divine to use you in some sort of inspirational, magical way, even as a healer for other people, but as a creative expression. You might write the most beautiful music that you've ever written in your life at this time, or you might write an amazing novel, or some type of fantasy work, or some film, or something that is just beyond what you've ever done before, because your channels are now open to the divine. So they are the main themes throughout this transit of Uranus to the 12th house, and it's so exciting. So if you're experiencing that, it's a real blessing, and what it's doing is setting you up for Uranus to transit through the first house in 7 years' time, when there will be a massive new beginning in your life. Uranus's transit to the first house, which will be coming up in 7 years' time for you guys, or thereabouts, depending on where Uranus is currently transiting through your 12th house, whether it's at the end of the 12th house. It might be the first house transit might be coming up in a matter of months for you. It all depends whereabouts in a particular sign he's sitting. At the start will mean you've got 7 years of this transit. At the end will mean you're going to be looking at maybe even months or weeks before the change happens. But this 12th house transit has or is setting you up for Uranus's move into the first house. And when this happens, when he moves into the first house, it's considered one of the big 4 transits of life, the most life-changing, direction-changing, soul person, life-being changing transits a person can ever experience, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime transit. So out of interest sake, you might like to look at my video on Uranus's transit through the first house to give you a bit of insight regarding what's in store for you when Uranus transits your first house in not so very long, really. So may this be a blessing to you. Thanks for joining me. And for those who've gone through the whole series of Uranus's transits, thank you so much for joining me for all these videos. It has been a pleasure and a delight. I'm hoping to do many more of these series, and I hope they've been a blessing to you as well. Thank you, and God bless.